All right, thanks. So yeah, I tried to send in a fancy title and reworked that. We're flying drones around Norway. But basically, my project is working with a group of highway forecasters in Norway, and they're really interested in operationalizing drones to improve their forecasting products because they have a really data sparse region. This area here that I was lucky enough to go to this March and kind of find out what that process looks like. And my project is really looking at how this affects their decision making. But today I'm actually going to talk about what this process looks like for a forecaster to actually go collect this data, process it, and then incorporate it into a forecast that they issue.
What are those triangles?
Yeah, those are snow retardants, and they're way too small for this massive slide path, but they're like 20 feet tall, and this is like at the bottom of something like the dictator shoots. So they don't work, but yeah, they tried. So just to orient ourselves a little bit to the area, this is Norway, where this push pin is. Satris Skarsfjeld is that area, that main slide path. And this is about 61 degrees north, which is about the same latitude as Anchorage, Alaska. It's not quite Arctic territory, but still pretty far north compared to where we are. Then if we zoom in a little closer, we're now looking at where the slide path is just north of a pretty big glacier in southern Norway. And I'm kind of highlighting these areas because just want to explain why I picked this field site. So this is actually where the closest forecasters are to this field site. And that's a 3-hour drive in Norway. There's a lot of windy roads and tunnels, a couple of ferry rides. This is a challenging process getting around Norway, actually. They don't have very high speed limits either. And then the next closest forecaster, all the way down in Bergen, the second largest city in Norway, that's a 7-hour drive. So these guys, before my project, are making 7-hour and 3-hour drives to go fly the drone and then process that data and push it out to their forecaster so they can use it. So it's actually a huge investment from them. But this field site is awesome because we'll zoom in a little closer, and this is that main slide path. And it's really big, has about 2,000 feet of vertical run, start zone 35, 38 degrees, and it threatens this really narrow stretch of road. And if we go look at it on the ground, it's the same picture. So that's it here. And they also do a lot of mitigation here, so that provided me some opportunities for validating their forecasts in the future when I look through that stuff this summer. And this area actually has a couple of other slide paths. So this slide path is called Kvitnova, much shorter path, maybe 800 vertical feet, and same start zones, 35, 38 degrees. And that is just right across the valley and on the ground. Looks like this. It's that mountain just under the sun there. And that's it's a big threat to the area, but that one doesn't reach the road very often. And then there's actually a really small path as they come out of the tunnel right here. And that's a really small path, but it reaches the road the most frequently. So on the ground, looks like that. That's some of the only vegetation in the area. And that's you can see how it just kind of sharply looms over the road right as you come out of a tunnel. So looking at that whole area, got three pretty, I don't know, not all of them are that big, but all of them together threaten this stretch of road that's only 2 miles long. And you actually come out of a tunnel at the bottom of the screen there, and in the middle, you're protected by a snow shed. And then again, you're exposed until you go back into a tunnel. So this is a kind of a challenging area for them because they don't have a lot of data. This is not a huge recreational area where they're going to get a ton of observations. But one benefit they have is they have a research station here, which is this area over here, that's shown up. And so they can actually stay there while they fly their drones, and that's been really helpful to them because we can get some routine flights without them having to do that commute over and over. They can. Yeah.
What kind of snow climate are you looking at
there? We're looking at a maritime snowpack. Really, it can get really deep. It's when I was there, it was about 400 centimeters. So, that was they were calling it kind of a below average year for them. So yeah, like pretty big snowpack there. And so looking at those weather stations, it's really just these two weather stations, and they're just not that helpful to them. This Nova weather station gives them wind direction, and temperature, but the valley winds are actually a lot different than the ridgetop winds, and they both load the slide path. So they found that weather station data is not that helpful. And then further down, about 2,000 feet below the start zones, they have a precipitation station that's actually built for another slide path, and that's the best precipitation data they get. So the best thing about the Nova weather station is that it has a webcam. So that points right across the valley at the start zone, and on really nice clear days, you can get an image like this, which is really helpful for forecasters. And if you're looking at this a lot, you can kind of see that there's a cornice and maybe a little slough coming off. So this would be a helpful image for a forecaster. And it's actually so helpful that these forecasters will submit observations through the webcam on their public observation site. So that's some of the best data they get for the area. And then they actually have a road level cam that kind of faces west at those snow mounds, and that just gives them information about the road conditions. Is there maybe some debris on the road, or are the plows having trouble keeping up with the snow? And that might tell them more about precipitation than anything. So, at night when a bright semi is driving by, that's what that can look like. So obviously this was a problem for them. So for the 2022-23 season, they decided to incorporate this drone with a LiDAR scanner. So this drone has RTK, which is real-time kinetic positioning, which allows them to not have to put ground control points out there. And then the LiDAR, which is light detection and ranging, pulses a laser at the snow surface. It records that return, and then they can take it home, plug it in, get the 3D point cloud, and all of a sudden they have a snow surface model for the area. So this has been pretty helpful. They did a trial run last season, and now they're incorporating it this year into the information they use to write forecasts. So this is an example of a digital elevation model of the start zone. You can actually see here they put in a shot, and there's a result just on the top right part of the screen there. And this is all available on their web application. And if we were actually on that website, I could zoom in because I'd be curious about that and see that, like, cool, we had like a D2 size avalanche, not huge, but it was a result and had really good eyes on it. And then the best part about this is you can start subtracting these digital elevation models from one another. So you can start to get erosion and deposition of snow throughout the season. And so this was a really big wind event that happened in February of this year that I'll talk about a little more. The forecasters by noon want to push a forecast to their operation, their highway operation. So if you're that forecaster, 10 a.m., you're starting to look through all the data. This would have been the webcam imagery from the Nova weather station that day. So you'd think, I'm not really sure what's going on. I can't see anything. So I would go maybe to the road level. Maybe the winds aren't as bad. Maybe you can see some wind, but it's pretty washed out and actually pretty hard to tell. So I would go to that Nova weather station next, and I'm not going to make you read all those numbers, so I'll just highlight a couple here. So the 24-hour wind the highest wind gusts we had was 14.5 meters per second, so 30, 35 miles an hour. And then the highest sustained wind was 10.5 meters per second, so like 20, 25 miles per hour. So the weather is not telling me that there's really anything significant going on. And just want to remind all of you that actually this picture was taken on February 21st, the day before. So this LiDAR scan was done at 8 a.m. And then we go to the next day, and you can still see where the shot went off, but the avalanche has basically been erased. I can't see it at all on the snow surface and see like significant kind of wind effect on the shoulder there. So this is where the erosion and deposition map would be super helpful, because I had 2 days in a row that I can compare. So I go to this erosion and deposition that I showed earlier. You look a little closer, and this is saying that there was 5 to 2 meters of erosion in these really bright red areas. And then in even the orange areas, it's showing 0.5 meter to 2 meters of erosion. So basically, this wind came through and erased an avalanche problem that existed. So if I'm a forecaster, now I could maybe be more confident about going to low. And then when I think about those valley winds I talked about that are different, I actually go to the shoulder in that lower slide path, that the Satria-Scarsfield West path, and I can see a little bit of an avalanche, and I can tell this is avalanche just because I've been looking at these images all season, but it's a smaller avalanche that went off there. So that one that threatens the road actually got loaded a little. And again, I can go to erosion and deposition, and I can see that there was quite a bit of deposition right where that path slid, and then I see the erosion of where that avalanche went. So this is information that the weather stations missed. They wouldn't have been able to get it from webcams. They would have had to traditionally rely on just observations from skiers or people that were around the area. And like I said, that's not something that's very common in this area to go skiing recreationally. So I just want to talk about how we get to getting that product available to our forecasters. And this is a workflow that the forecasters came up with that they use, because there's actually quite a few steps to be able to get those images up and on a web application and put in use. So first, they can do the flight planning in the office, which is, once it's done, very easy. They program it, upload it to the drone, and you don't really have to change that flight plan ever again if you've got it dialed in for the slide path that you're interested in and you feel like it's a good pattern. So they do that, and they'll go out in the field and they can hit a button to take off, and they'll actually manually fly the drone to the start point. And the reason they do that in Norway, the drone isn't supposed to be out of line of sight or more than 120 meters off the ground. So they do this just to stay within the regulations. And then from that point, it gets to the start zone. The monitor tells them we're there. They hit start, and they don't have to fly from that point. They'll just monitor the data collection. They can see if it's missing any spots, or the LiDAR is just not taking because of weather or other problems. So it'll offer warnings throughout the whole process and then alert them that it's finished. They'll fly it back close to them, and then they can press a button and it lands. And that is really the easy part. And this takes, for one slide path, that biggest one takes 30 minutes to fly. And what they'll do is actually take out the SD card. They'll put it in their computer immediately to start uploading that data, change out the batteries in the drone, and then go fly the other 2 paths. So from there, they get all that uploaded, and then the data processing and publishing starts. So at this point, they're about 2 hours in when they're finally sitting down at the computer, going through all that data. They need to have the data converted into a point cloud so they get a 3D image of their area. And then from there, they can start building a raster for ArcGIS, their web application, and getting those erosion and deposition maps. And also here they can actually go in and remove any statistical outliers with the point cloud generating software. So there, if they see ground point or points that didn't hit the ground from the LiDAR scanner, they're able to remove those points because they just are statistical outliers. And then the real forecasting happens. So much like all of us, we look at weather data, we maybe look at snow pit data. This is just another piece of data that they're looking at to build the story. Sometimes it's relevant, sometimes it's not, and they're not really changing their process here any more than any other forecast agency or group is using. And from there, they make the decision, open, close the road, and move on from there, change the hazard level if they need to. So this is obviously a really big time investment for them, but it's also a monetary investment. So just in terms of it, exactly what they're using the DJI M300, and that right now was put these prices up from their website last week was $13,700. The ZenMuse L1 is not some really fancy LiDAR scanner. It's something that's publicly available, so it's $9,800. And then you need a computer at the bare minimum with this stuff, and it's about how much that costs. So kind of that initial investment is going to be $25,000. And then there are all these kind of subscription fees that you're going to have to pay for, the initial investment, but then the annual investment is going to be something more like $2,500, could be more depending on how many people you want to give access to cloud storage. So a big initial investment, but also this is considerably cheaper than what the prices of a LiDAR scanner were 5 years ago. So there's obviously that monetary investment, that time investment, and then there are going to be hurdles that your operation has to deal with to incorporate this stuff. So first, you have to train employees, and that's not necessarily training them on how to use the drone, but how to interpret this data and how to look at this data and say, oh, well, I don't think the LiDAR actually picked up the right amounts, or something is off with the data. I don't think we can use this today. So just like any new technology that you're trying to onboard, you're going to have to go through some troubleshooting and training on using that stuff. Additionally, you need a number of employees that you can waste on this, essentially, if you want to call it a waste. Maybe I shouldn't say it, but you're going to lose a couple of forecasters potentially. So in Norway, they've got 2 guys who are still a part of issuing the forecast, but they're mainly working on this project. So they don't have the time to write a forecast. And one solution to that is hiring a contractor, but that's something that is going to not only take money, but you're going to have to work out an agreement to have this contractor on call throughout the season. Maybe they live close to a slide path, and that would be really helpful, but in Norway, they have to give the people a week lead time to get this contractor out at the site to fly the paths, and we all know that week out weather is not that great for these things. So yeah. And then routine flights. So like I said, when we were looking at that wind event, it was really helpful to have 2 days in a row of data, but that erosion and deposition map is not going to be very helpful if you have scans that are a week apart. There's obviously going to be some amount of erosion and deposition, but it may not be as fine of data as you want. So this has been a problem in Norway with those long flights or long drives. They aren't able to get there at every weather event. We've actually had some trouble with, they're just going up there and getting a scan when they can, and sometimes the data we get is not that meaningful. It's just another digital elevation model of the same stuff. And then weather. Obviously, LiDAR isn't perfect, or even if you're taking photos with the drone, it's not perfect. This is an example of the drone flying over the slide path in super foggy conditions. And this is common weather in Norway. So when we look at the LiDAR scan from that day, we see a bunch of what they call pock marks in here, and they had to go in and remove some of these statistical outliers. And then they also have these weird striations that's not actually what's going on the snow surface. So it goes back to training the employees to see this, and then also your operation has to realize that you may not have data on this stuff every single day. And finally, regulations, and that's maybe some state and federal stuff, but it's also going to be regulations within your organization. Like, what are you going to do if you lose a drone in the middle of the slide path? Are you going to leave it there for the season? Is there going to be some way to go get it? In Norway, they can't fly the drones over the road, so they have to come up with some flight paths to get across the road by crossing around a tunnel. So there are things that we aren't even thinking of today that your organization might come up with and say, hey, like, we got to do this if we're flying a drone of this size. So I want to bring this back to maybe like, who could use this stuff. And I think that the one thing I realized is kind of to start this off, you need a well-defined path that you're flying over, and you really are curious about this path because it has something that you have trouble predicting. I don't think it would be good for just flying around in the backcountry because you're not going to be able to replicate that place, and you have to carry it all out there. Routine flights, I really want to drive this home because I think without routine flights, the data is less helpful. So if you can be in a place like a ski area or a highway operation where you are flying over that path or within close proximity to that path on a daily basis, that's going to be best case scenario. And also you have a question to be answered. If you have slide paths where you feel like you know everything about them, and if it gets this much wind, this much snow, you're going to put a bomb on it, like that's basically not something that this would be for. This would be more interesting for maybe a spring problem where you feel like you have trouble getting the timing right, or you really like to put a shot on something when it gets a certain amount of wind load and you can monitor that wind load in a place where it's hard to get eyes on. And then you have an ability to process this data quickly. In Norway, they have really good 5G access, even in the mountains. And so that's why they're able to start uploading this stuff from the field immediately. And again, a ski area where you can get to an office pretty quickly after the flight, start uploading this stuff, or a highway operation that has a station close by to the slide path. You can really get this stuff uploading, processing, and able to get it out to your forecasters quickly. And then finally, I really think you need to have a motivation to adapt to this new technology. I don't think this is something that you're going to try out for one season, be like, oh, it doesn't work, and then leave it. I don't think you'll learn anything from it if you do that, and you won't find the benefits of it. So you also really have to be able to learn about this stuff, see how it's going to change the way you forecast, and try and quantify that impact on your forecast as you work through this data. All right. That's the research station. Yeah. Yeah.
What are the weather limitations to flying the drone as far as wind and rhyming goes?
Yeah. So the wind resistance is 15 meters per second, and the rhyming, they're very capable of actually, a lot of times we'd have the drone come back and it would have buildup on the blades, and it just drains the battery quicker, but it wasn't losing altitude or anything like that. So pretty capable in terms of rhyming. 15 meters per second wind speed is when it starts getting blown off the path a little bit.
So once you make the initial investment of the $25,000 and then $2,500 a year, like it's in your best interest then to be flying it as often as you can.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
and you can fly it at night.
Yeah, I mean, think about a ski area trying to figure out what they're going to be doing at 7 a.m. You could have a crew that goes out really early, like with the bomb makers or something, and actually fly those paths in the middle of the night. So early morning.
So if they have a camera that looks at the slide paths, like what would be the benefit of just having a land-based LiDAR that just scans the face and then having a little shed that you don't have to worry about drones, battery, storms?
Yeah, I think that where they felt the benefit is they could invest in 2 of these drones and be able to fly a bunch of stuff. So they're actually trying to take this out into assessing all geohazards in this area. So they're able to fly these drones in places where they don't have problems in the winter, but they have problems in the summer. And so they don't have to deal with having a ground-based system that can only do one thing. Yeah.
Similarly, if you had a ground or a fixed LiDAR station, what are the primary meteorological limitations to gathering quality data? Would it be precipitation, cloud cover?
Yeah, I haven't looked a lot at the ground-based stuff, but that would be my initial thought, that they're just going to have the same sort of trouble with weather as the standard
Do
LiDAR.
you get like just none, or is it just a poor quality?
It's really mostly been a poorer quality. There's a few days, and you can tell it's one of those days that you don't want to fly, like just by looking at, like it's, complete milk bottle condition. So yeah. Yeah.
How often are they flying?
They're flying as often as they can. So the best case scenario, like while I was there, they were flying daily, and that's probably the best, but they don't work on the weekends, so they don't fly on the weekends. And that's somewhere where the contractors can come in and help, but that's a limitation of theirs.
I'm not much of a drone girl, but
Yes.
if you can program the flight planner for it, why can't you program the drone to just take off and do the flight plan and come back and eventually be able to be operatable without staff?
Yeah, for not being a drone girl, you're at the cutting edge of drone technology. The drone stations are coming, and that would change everything. I think that is maybe the biggest step, and they're making them. It's just a matter of testing them, having them work for a drone the size, having that you trust your LiDAR scanner to be in there all season with changing weather conditions. But if these forecasters 7 hours away can hit a button because they know a storm's coming, they want a scan right before the storm, that'd be great. Then they could scan after the weather cleared. Yeah.
You said those delta snow height maps were publicly available on the website after you got doing the LiDAR DEMs?
Yeah, I could share that link with you. Yep.
Also, what wavelength is the LiDAR?
I
Deciding whether or not
can't.
to bother you for this
I
data.
can't. I did this because I knew I wouldn't be able to remember everything. I can't remember. I'm not sure I see it up there. But I could, I'll find it for you.
Did they ever consider a fixed wing option to maximize their zone of interest, and maybe the cost benefits would be?
Yeah, I think they have, and it just seemed like this was the best opportunity for them to really stay more mobile and getting different areas. They were familiar with flying drones, so that one of their guys had dealt primarily with these drones in particular and not the fixed wing options. So I don't think they really considered it, but yeah.
What do the forecasters think? Do they think it's helpful, or do they just
Yeah, I think that that's really the kind of meat of my thesis that I obviously haven't had time to go through the data, but they're just finding that there are these little problems that can improve their confidence. So like that day, the forecaster did go to low without the drone data, but the forecaster who wrote the forecast with the drone data was just more confident in that low. And I have a matrix that they use to express their confidence, which, yeah, we could talk about what does confidence actually mean for a forecast, but let's not do that. I think it really, like, that's just a really good example of knowing what the wind actually did to the slide path, as opposed to being like, I'm pretty sure that wind direction strips this path. Yeah.
I suppose it's a way to truth, or another tool to truth what you think you know.
Yeah,
You know, to
exactly.
maybe hone your own parameters
Yeah.
too.
Do you have a question, Gabby?
That sort of seems like, from a forecasting standpoint, like the times when you couldn't see from the webcam are also the times you couldn't fly the drone.
Yeah.
Like wind, snow, LiDAR doesn't work with snow, there's too much backscatter. So have they considered putting, like, it seems like it would make sense to put a passive sensor on that webcam aimed at that slope that could just, like, I don't know, have they thought about that as far as like reconstructing the depths on there, do some type of photogrammetry?
Yeah, I mean, they were actually able to get that LiDAR scan that day. Like those images that I showed were LiDAR scans of that day. I don't think they've considered that, but yeah, that's a really big question. Like, they could probably put in better weather stations. They could get more webcams down there, and yeah, there's a lot of options of where to put the money. That's why they wanted me to do this, to try and figure out, should we put more money in this in other places?
Buy more explosives.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you get a cheap intern from Montana.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Cool.
Thank you, Alex.
Yeah, you got it.
So let's take